The 12 apostles, these sent ones, are, notice first, Simon, who is called Peter. The word Peter means rock or stone. He was a fisherman. Andrew, who was his brother, it says, his name means manly. Why are the names so important? Because it's interesting that many times the parents would name their children based upon some characteristic that they perhaps saw or wanted to see in their life. We name our children and we don't think about the character, nor do we think about the fact that they're going to be in high school one day and be invited to a party, and we got to consider their name. We don't have that foresight. We just name kids. No consideration in mind. Imagine a boy who goes to school and he's 600 pounds, yet his parents have named him Tiny. These things, we ought to take some consideration when it comes to naming kids. One book tells about parents who had twins and they were looking for names, and it just so happened the mother was in the cabinet in her kitchen and she saw these two things and she named her kids after them. Orange and Lamont Jaleel.
Lord help me.
I'll give you some time and then you can. Orange and Lamont Jaleel. True story. But these names have characteristics, and certainly Andrew, his name was manly, and he was also a fisherman. James is supplanter. He was also a fisherman. How interesting. John, his name means Jehovah is a gracious giver. That's what the name John means, and certainly he was also a fisherman. Philip, his name means lover of horses. Bartholomew, son of Ptolemy. Son of Ptolemy. Thomas, it means a twin. Matthew, gift of Jehovah. He was a tax collector. He was a publican. Someone hated, despised by the Jewish people. James, again, supplanter. Labius, a man of the heart, whose surname was Thaddeus, large-hearted. Simon, again, means rock. He was one, it says Simon the Canaanite, or in another passage, Simon the Zealot. How interesting. Zealot means burning with zeal. Simon was someone who was part of a group that was going to overthrow the Roman government. But he was called to be a disciple of Jesus. And of course, what is really interesting is the name Judas, or Judah, which simply means praise to him. I find it interesting that the one who would betray him, yet his name means praise to God. And of course, the title Iscariot, men of Carioth, is what Iscariot means. Judas Iscariot, men of Carioth. Carioth is simply a city, a town, south of Judea. And Judas and his people were from that place. And so as we look at the names and as we see some of the occupation, fishermen and tax collectors and zealots, people from different places, and yet he called them to be his men who would carry out the work and carry out the commission for him. What do we see here? That these men were not necessarily extraordinary men. They were ordinary men. But what is God saying? Look at yourself. God wants to use ordinary people to do some extraordinary things. Look at your background. Look at your beginnings. Look at my background. Look at our beginnings. None of us, I don't think, are that wealthy here today. At least in my family, unless they hid it from me and just haven't told me, they're just ordinary people. My wife and I were on a date this week, and we were talking about this. And I said, you know what? I said, your parents told me that you had a lot of dough. I didn't know they were talking about making bread. I assumed you had some money, but evidently, as all of us, we're just ordinary people to whom God has called to do extraordinary things. So what about the scope of discipleship? First of all, it is irrespective of geography.